All right, welcome back to another episode of the Supply Chaney podcast. I am your host, Nathan Chaney, and today we're going to uncover yet another one of the many parts and pieces of what's going on in supply chain. And as we all know these days, we are talking a lot about technology and a lot about AI and this really soft side of technology and supply chain. But that ends here today on this episode because we've got Colin on to talk about the harder side, the hardware side, and kind of where that software meets hardware. And that is with kind of the humanoid robotics element within supply chain, specifically in industrial and warehouse type settings. Colin, I'm really excited to have you on today to talk about a little bit about yourself, how you got into this space, and what you're up to today. Without further ado, can you take a couple of minutes and introduce the audience to you?
Amazing, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me. It's amazing to be on the Supply Chaney podcast and the first humanoid robot company on here.
There you go.
Maybe a little bit about me. I'm in San Francisco currently, so obviously a lot of AI stuff happens here. But my journey started in Georgia, where I grew up, and I am getting really, really lucky in high school and being like a big robotics nerd and going to a high school that didn't have any basketball team or any football team, but we had 13 different robotics teams. So quite a lot of robotics back then. And I got to be president of this robotics club the year that we sent 7 of our teams to world championships. So did that, started local middle school robotics programs to help teach younger students how to program and how to engineer. And now, that's transformed the school over a decade later. And I'd say that's probably what got me into where I went to college, where I went to MIT. I could never decide if I liked building physical things or building software more. And so I just ended up studying both back in college, which I'm not entirely sure was like the best path in terms of just like, I don't know, student life balance. But I ended up having a really good time regardless, going and studying mechanical engineering and computer science, working on all different types of automation and systems through college. And so I got a chance to work on drones. I got a chance to work on, there's this like 3D map of campus at MIT where it's kind of like an Iron Man-esque map where if you walk around campus and you find it, you can basically wave your hand around any of these 3D buildings on campus and touch one to see what's going on at MIT at any given point in time. I designed that. And I worked on self-driving cars after graduating. And so that's kind of my journey up until becoming an entrepreneur, to where, one of my buddies and I decided a few years ago that we were going to go and start a company. And so we started this AI company, raised millions of dollars of venture funding, and then sold our company last year, which allows me to take my second big bet on where we're at now with Avatar. And we're bringing humanoids into industrial facilities and allowing basically the ability for us as people, as humans, to bring down the cost of everything while providing more jobs than we could possibly ever imagine on the planet, to be able to use robots at scale. And so I know that was a lot, and happy to dive into any in more detail.
Well, clearly, given what you've done, what you do, this whole elevator pitch idea, like you've got that down pat, right? So super polished. But let's maybe take a step back in time a little bit. And what were, where did you grow up a little bit more? And was that, there in Georgia, and what kind of initially was that spark to go down sort of the STEM path? Was it parents, or was it just where you were, or how did all that work out?
Yeah. Grew up in Georgia, so I spent a lot of time outdoors and just like, growing up as a kid, just building random things outside. I don't know, my hobby and friends' pastime. One of my friends ended up having a gigantic like dirt bike track basically in the woods that we would go and try and chop down trees and hack out new paths in the yards. And I was always that kid who around holiday time would love to just get sets of Legos. And so I just, around Christmas time would spend all holidays just like building Legos, and then also playing video games. And so loved building things, loved video games, and was doing this in Georgia. I think that set me up to make a really critical, a really pivotal decision of going to this charter school in high school, where in middle school I did a lot of sports. But I had the opportunity of basically by lottery going to this free high school that was just the school. The name of the school had math, science, and technology in the name of the school. And so we had all these different robotics teams. I was able to take robotics classes back in high school. I was able to take a nanotechnology class in high school. And so like my curiosity with technology, I think just, like got away there. And I think that's probably when I first started diving off the deep end.
So does that mean like when you made that decision, maybe there's a little bit less focus on sports and stuff that had kind of been the occupier of your time, I guess, just 1 or 2 years before?
Yeah, no, I mean, definitely. 1 or 2 years before I was playing, basketball and playing football. And then I go to a school that didn't have any sports at all. And instead of sports, we had the Robo Dragons.
Right.
I became a big Robo Dragon. Robotics quickly ended up being something that I just spent all my time on because I thought it was so cool.
Right. And then, such that lottery concept, it just feels like, if we were all to like go back in time and pick that one pivotal decision that really decided kind of the future course of our entire career, would that be it maybe? Or is there another one or two?
I think that played a major role for sure. And, I'm from the Atlanta area where the public school system in Atlanta is notoriously not as great as, folks who grew up around Boston public schools or folks who grew up around, the Bay Area or
right.
New York or DC, these types of areas. And so I think that school that I went to definitely served a huge role, but probably an even bigger role was my mother, who she was a teacher and an educator. And so for her, the value of education and the value of just kind of following your curiosity there was always still instilled in us as a family. And so we always, we're taught to do that. And we're always encouraged to work as much as we can on the things that we enjoy. And so I think that, motivationally helps me a lot as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that core value of curiosity and building stuff. I remember similarly, I loved to take things apart, out in the shop and just, especially things that didn't work. I was like, well, there's low consequence if I can't put this thing back together. Maybe I could even fix it. I never really had a great success rate with that. Talk a little bit about, as you moved there in the high school and you were on the robotics teams and you eventually kind of moved in toward a leadership position. Like, can you talk about like that journey? Did it feel natural or did you get some mentorship? Kind of how was the journey toward leadership?
Yeah, it's definitely the village raising the child, right? And so I think I naturally was a person who was great at talking to others and being a friendly guy and being able to inspire people. But I also had a lot of help in the sense of, I was a big member of, I ended up getting into this leadership program, which basically took 3 students from every single high school in my county and said, okay, you guys are going to be the student leaders and ambassadors to the rest of the school as we try and cultivate this whole county of student leaders. And so I was in this leadership program called the Gwinnett Student Leadership Team, GSLT, and ended up being able to learn from a lot of like kind of these leadership and experts. And I got to learn from a guy named Dr. Tim Elmore, who had written a handful of books on leadership and student leadership, and got to learn from John Maxwell and all of these folks back in high school. And so that helped. I was able to now, become a leader myself, but now start teaching that to other students within the high school and hosting leadership summits and all of that, while also bringing that into the world of like robotics and engineering and with what I was doing with the robotics club and with our like engineering honor society and all of these groups. And so I think I had the right playground, I would say, for becoming a leader in the technical field, which I think back in high school I didn't realize at the time where that would really take me, but it's been nice.
That's, it's interesting as we have this conversation. I could just start putting like the Lego blocks of building blocks of what you need to be able to go out and do big things in the world. And you've already like checked off a number of those things and added them to your little Lego castle here. So it just seems like, 2020 vision in hindsight, it just looks like there were all those steps in motion that you just don't know where it's going to take you. Right. So
yeah.
So after high school, so you were like world championships and robotics and competitions, and so it seems like you're very pretty heavy on this path, and it seems like a natural progression to go toward a robotics and engineering heavy sort of university program.
Yeah, yeah. Natural in a way. I mean, I think I didn't really know what MIT was, for example, until probably like my junior year of high school.
Okay.
So it was like, I don't know. It's like when you're in high school and college doesn't really become a thing until you're like near the end of high school, and you're like, oh, wait a minute, like, that is a thing. I need to actually study colleges. And so I remember seeing a whole bunch of students, and you know, lucky for me to have exposure in this way. Seeing a whole bunch of students talk about MIT junior year and talk about a particular program that they had for high school juniors called MITES, and it was basically an introductory program to engineering and science and tech, where you get to go to MIT's campus and take classes at MIT, between junior year and senior year summer.
Okay.
And so I applied for this program, not really knowing much of what this was at all, but I already had made a lot of headway and I guess impact in my school within robotics, within starting robotics clubs at local middle schools, within being just a leader on our campus or at our school. And I got into this MITES program. And with that, that was my very first time going to Boston.
Okay.
And very first introduction to MIT and like what actually that was. And I think that maybe ignited like a passion in me for being able to like want to learn more and want to like explore more. And so that's probably my first introduction to like the next step of college and going there.
Okay. All right. Man, the story just keeps building here. So then we fast forward then. So you got through junior year and senior year. And I guess that seed that was planted with MITES kind of bloomed and that turned out to be your kind of college choice.
Yeah. No, MITES was amazing. I remember not only like building and working on robots back during my first like MIT classes, but I also got to take a class on like quantum physics. And I didn't even know what quantum physics was at the time, but now I'm just being exposed to it. I'm like, wow, this is so cool. Like how much more can I possibly learn? And then, ended up coming in senior year, applying to MIT, applying to other colleges, and MIT during the kind of college admin weekends just blew me away in the sense of there were literally no other colleges where I could find thousands of labs where people could work on everything from cameras that can see like behind corners and walls to swarm drones to robots to submarines and all of these types of things. And I was like, I would love to just like work on them all.
Yeah.
And I don't know, an environment that I would say pushes you and encourages you to just build cool things for fun. And I think that is what was kind of the music that was playing throughout the rest of my time at MIT, which is like, let's just build cool things for fun. And then it turned out you can actually build some really cool things.
Yeah, things that have more of a functional sort of purpose and stuff beyond just the fun part of it, I suppose.
Sure. And so, I mean, sometimes the fun is the function in the sense of when we would come onto campus if you come onto campus as a freshman, there are a group of students who will literally build a working, functional roller coaster and a 3-story fort outside of the dorm. Where they built, not only did they build the roller coaster, they built this whole app back when it was harder to make apps than it was today. Built this whole app to like reserve your spot in line and basically like reserve a ride on the roller coaster. And then you could ride on it. And then they had this 3-story fort for a massive outdoor party and a huge like Van de Graaff machine that someone could play piano keys and have like lightning come out of the machine, basically in tune with the piano keys that they were playing.
Yeah.
So it was just like, wait a minute, like everyone's just hacking on all of these amazing like technologies just because they're passionate about it. And I think that environment is really conducive to like discovering some pretty cool things.
Yeah. So let's kind of fast forward then through you camp out there, get some education, and then like what's your what are you thinking that you want to do, as you're starting to look for, your sort of adult career and whatnot? Like, you have an idea of where you want to go, and then how did that compare to, like, I guess, where your first stop was out of school?
Oh man, I don't know. I mean, I think I'm in this constant journey of figuring out what I want to do, and I think as you see across history, you actually have the ability to, and you could do something and dive really, really deep into it, and then 10 years later, be doing something completely different and diving deep and making an impact on that as well.
Right.
When I started my first like internship type experience was in Mexico, and I had this opportunity to basically do research at this university in Mexico, which was like the number one like university across Latin America, technical array. And I got to study with a professor, Pedro Ponce, who was working on AI for power electronics. And my project specifically was, how do you make a drone simulation, and how do you make that be something that flies itself on its own to get from one point in space to another. And this is like well before everybody started using drones. It was in the days where, like, if you wanted to test something on a drone, you actually had to test it on an actual real physical drone, which were expensive at the time, and you could easily test something that breaks and completely breaks your drone.
Yeah.
And so we wanted to figure out a way to do like onboard simulations that you could test out all different things and simulate it before you had to do it on the real drone, and then run simulations on board on the drone. I was doing this at 19 years old. I think it made me realize that I loved traveling and speaking Spanish and learning languages and all of that. I didn't quite think that research was cut out for me, in the sense of, you could spend, I spent a very short amount of time, but some people, you could spend years working on something and then find out that, okay, 90% of the things that you just worked on are just completely irrelevant. The thing that actually matters is this piece, and like, you're going in a completely different direction. And so I think I just didn't quite have the patience for that. And so I ended up publishing a chapter of an AI book, closing that chapter, and then working on other things ranging from going and working on like fintech automation opportunities to self-driving cars afterwards, and working on like the 3D printed map of campus, the tangible map of campus, to other projects as well over the course of
And so what was that first, after graduation or whatnot? Was it immediately just launching that first venture, or kind of like what you said you were in autonomous vehicles for a minute?
Yeah, so after graduating, I ended up going to General Motors and Cruise as part of their robotaxi program.
Mm-hmm.
I would say I was on the GM side, so the side that produced the vehicles and basically decided what sensors go on the vehicles, developing out those sensors so that they can actually see objects and people, 200 meters down the road and all of that. I was probably the youngest person on my team by 10 years. And so got an introduction to not only the world of like self-driving cars, but then also the world of corporate America, the world of like, mass manufacturing and production, the world of, having to travel to a bunch of places because you had LiDAR companies that, you guys had bought that were in California, and the self-driving cars were like deployed in California. Your actual development that was being done in Detroit, Michigan, and living out there. And then you had your test facilities near the Toronto area. So I would say I got the experience of being part of a massive both autonomy group, but also a massive like manufacturing group and production in the world.
It's great. I think it's, valuable for everyone to always to have that experience, to feel what it's like to be, a piece of a really big machine. What was your takeaway, kind of if we think about it in terms of today and being a startup and whatnot, like, do you kind of want to be like that? You want to get to that kind of scale, or like, how do you feel about growth and just being big?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'd love to get to that type of scale. I think I would probably do it differently, in the sense of, try and create a company that's more like Amazon, as opposed to more like one of the auto companies, in the sense of, there is an art and a benefit of being able to do things quickly from a startup. And so, if we discover something new and we want to implement that, we can just start implementing that, today.
Yeah.
And we can make quick changes that help our customers and help solve their problems faster, just by being able to move and not have to go through so many like approval processes to get something done. I think when you add in the large company, obviously you can get massive amounts of things done. And a company like General Motors will get massive amounts of things done. But in terms of being able to redirect the ship, you can't move as quickly, right? You've got so many different people to get approvals from, and all these different teams in order to kind of go
turn the ship.
And oftentimes it's hard to do so. I think one of the things that I appreciated about companies like Amazon, for example, are that they have done a really, really good job at modularizing their teams, in the sense that the teams are almost competitive in a certain way. Of each team operates as its own business unit and transacts and interacts with other teams as if they're like separate companies. Yeah. And so you're kind of in this, like long-term, but like perpetual startup phase of like, okay, if our team wants to survive, we need to move fast. Our team needs to move fast. Our team needs to make sure that we make the right deals with the next teams and make sure that we hit the right KPIs. Otherwise, our team's not going to be around for long. And I think that's a very different mentality that is really important when growing a startup as well.
Wow. Thanks for sharing. I hadn't quite heard that, I hadn't quite heard side or element of the Amazon culture, which, yeah, really amazing. Let's kind of start moving in toward, the business end of things here in that first startup that you were involved with.
Yeah. Where was helpful to start?
I guess, what was the inspiration for it, I guess, and what kind of problem were you solving? And I guess how long were you working on it before you exited?
Yeah. Cool. So inspiration was, my co-founder and I had basically done all different types of automation. We'd been, mechanical engineers and computer scientists, and we worked on all different types of systems, and we could see this growing trend of massive companies relying on data to make decisions. And so you had your massive companies, which had more data than a small business, and now could make a smarter decision on what they do with their business as a result. Now, I came from a family, not only was my mom a teacher, but she was also a small business owner. And, my uncle was a small business owner. And I had multiple families who had owned and operated and started up, all these different types of small businesses. And I could see firsthand that, the world was heading in a direction where data was becoming increasingly important. But small business owners just didn't have the resources to be able to not only like understand how to deal with this massive amounts of data, but then also like hire a data scientist to help them make their decisions, or a team of data scientists. If you have a large company like Apple, they've obviously got massive data teams, and you've got Google and all these companies that have so many people who are looking at all of the data to make their decisions. And so we were trying to figure out, is there a way that we can help these small business owners use data in smarter ways? And could we help them do that more easily with the tools that they understand? So that set us up, and we ended up leaving our jobs. I was at General Motors and Cruise. My co-founder was at Apple, and we ended up quitting our jobs to go and build a company based off of that back in 2019. We actually didn't start off in the direction, in the area that we ended up pivoting to. We started in commercial real estate, on the idea that you could use data to always open up a storefront in the right locations. And, the theory was, if you could open up a restaurant or open up a retail store in the right locations, and you could fix the problem of like 90% of small businesses go out of business in the first year.
Right.
And so we're working on this up until COVID. And COVID completely just like shook the change out of us, of a business. And, all of our customers that were going to launch with us decided, okay, well, we are not going to be expanding at all anymore. Yeah. Nobody's expanding real estate during the time when everyone's sheltering at home. And so we ended up going through this journey of pivoting 7 different times, building 7 different products. And so we landed on Sauce, which was, in the same vein of helping small businesses make better decisions, but it was more so on the pricing and on the marketing side, where I can dive into that in more detail. But we built a very, very massive like automated marketing and pricing platform for the restaurant industry.
Okay. All right. Restaurant. You kind of like dabbling in that category there.
Yeah.
We all like food. We all got to eat. It's a consistent source of business if you can just capitalize on it, I guess.
Yeah.
And how did that chapter, I guess the food sort of chapter of your entrepreneurship journey, how did that close out?
So, I mean, it was a food chapter, but it was also an automation chapter still nonetheless, where in order to build that, we basically had to build browser automation before like agentic browser automation was a thing. And so, we had this massive automated platform that would go and update marketing campaigns and update pricing and whatnot to drive more consumer demand. That ended up growing to a place where we were closing deals with public companies. Wow. We were scaling across the country. And then we had a partner who was a leader within the restaurant industry and restaurant tech decide, okay, rather than just partnering with you guys, we would like to acquire your company. And so, we ended up going through a deal with them at the time, and then they bought our company, and basically that helps them scale their automated like restaurant technology vertical that they were building as well.
Awesome. So what was your total time, I guess, in that chapter of your life there?
Yeah. So the pre-sauce chapter was like end of 2019 until 2021. We ended up starting to work on sauce beginning of 2021, essentially, and then growing that until 2024. And then we sold it last summer. And I worked with the company for a bit to help us integrate our teams, and then ended up deciding to start Avatar Robotics this year in 2025.
There we go. Perfect segue into what it is that keeps you busy these days then. So,
oh, yeah.
Before we kind of launch on this chapter, just real quick, I try to ask folks, each of our guests, if they were going to go back in time and give one little bit of advice to themselves back when they were a junior in high school or a junior in college, or whatever that is there one small little nugget of wisdom you would give yourself at this still early stage, right? Still early stage, but that one little wisdom nugget you would hand off.
Yeah. Back when I was a junior in college, I think just the nugget of, risks while you're young are not that risky.
Yeah. Yep.
If you fall, you can always get back up. And, you will, going into starting a company or going into, chasing whatever dream you have, look, you'll fail, more times than you could possibly imagine. But you can always get back up. You can always recover. You can always keep working. And that place of getting back up is a learning experience that allows you to get back up twice as fast as the first time. And so every single time you can do that, you just become like so much better at the thing that you're trying to do. And if I had known that, maybe I would have dived into like entrepreneurship sooner. Obviously, I learned a lot going and working for a massive company. Right. But maybe I would have just said, hey, look, let's just go into startups right away. I know I don't have as much money in my pocket as I've graduated college, but like that could be the pressure on me to just like chase the thing that I want to chase and learn faster right away. And I think too many people, for fear of failure and wanting to make sure that they're like fully prepared before going into something, will delay their dreams at starting a company or at chasing their dreams until it's too late, until you're already kind of locked into, whatever lifestyle or supporting your family and different things that you need to do. And so there's no better time than now if you're considering doing something. Yeah.
I think it was Jeff Bezos it's either him or Elon, one of them that has a very similar quote to that of like, if you're going to fail, if you're going to try things, do it when you're young, when the consequences are much less intense.
Yeah. So now is always the least risky time of your life.
There you go. Right now, this moment. So let's pivot then to Avatar and kind of the launch and the problem you're trying to solve with Avatar.
Yeah. So right now, we as consumers, I think, have been groomed in a great way in which, we now have next day delivery. We now have things that are more affordable today than they were 20 years ago. And we want that trend to continue. right? And in order for that trend to continue, for next day delivery, you have to have people who are working in industrial facilities to get you that item the next day. Oftentimes they need to be working overnight or on a weekend, right? Because if you order something on a Friday, like you want it delivered Saturday, like somebody has to go and deliver that thing to you. If you want something to be, affordable, and you want to not have to spend an arm and a leg to buy your everyday resources, like, that's, you've got to manufacture that in an affordable way. And so we're kind of in this world where we have these growing consumer demands, more access to resources than we've ever had, and increasingly more, but we don't quite have the labor force, at least in America, for that. If you look at manufacturing, you look at logistics and industrial settings, you'll see tons and tons of vacancies in terms of like people willing to work in a warehouse or in a factory anymore. And that's important, because if nobody's willing to work in a warehouse or a factory anymore, or not as many people as we've had, from a population standpoint before, or from a demand standpoint before, then like we're not going to be able to have nice things. And so that's the big problem that we are solving. And what we have with Avatar is we have a humanoid robot system that can go into that factory and go into that warehouse and do a variety of tasks. And we have one that can do so intelligently because it is augmented by humans who are intelligent, who can handle all the different edge cases that robots can't. And so happy to dive into what that looks like in more detail, but that's in a nutshell what we're building.
And that would that kind of lend itself to the name that you've used to give to the brand, because by definition, well, maybe you can educate us real quick on what the definition in y'all's world is of an avatar.
Yeah, so an avatar robot is different because it is semi-autonomous from the jump, meaning that it doesn't rely entirely on AI, which is not ready to do all the different manual tasks of picking up items and moving them around as quickly and as reliably as a human can. But it bridges that gap with a human who can now control this robot from thousands of miles away and control fleets of robots from anywhere in the world. And so for manual jobs, who somebody in the past would have had to go in person in order to do that job, now any manual job anywhere in the world can now be a remote job, which makes it like night and day more accessible and more available to companies that are trying to build like large manual processes. And so you're going to see an interesting world develop when anyone with an internet connection can now plug in and control a robot or a fleet of robots from anywhere in the world to get any job done.
I'm sensing some inspiration from your playing video games days.
Yeah.
Where does that enter in? Is the future workforce of America like your top scores on Twitch, or how does this work from a future workforce for that avatar based ecosystem?
Yeah, no, it's quite exciting because you're going to see people be able to do work as easy as it is to play a video game, when you can control a robot and that robot is now, it's tending a warehouse, or it's tending a field, or it's mining valuable minerals, or it's building a city on the moon, right? Doing things that, couldn't imagine, maybe an underwater city or building a mountain, right? And if you look at comparable games like Minecraft, which I personally have played a lot of, and I know many folks around the world have played a lot of, there's a lot of hours that people are willing to spend picking strawberries or picking wheat, mining iron in a mountain, or building, the city of their dreams. At some point, people are going to be able to do that, starting today with Avatar, do that with an avatar robot, which means basically a robot that you can control that is like your kind of exoskeleton you can control with virtual reality or with a computer, and basically either control one of these robots or control many of these robots to do large, amazing projects that could be very, very valuable for many communities around the world.
Yeah. So the time that is spent kind of in entertainment, sort of the entertainment realm, can have a financial and economic impact in the real world, but also for that individual that's on their beanbag at home in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's got a fleet of robots in a field in California.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. Like you could be literally operating a fleet of robots to build some, I don't know, some 100-story building, right? And like you are operating the team that is doing, all of the cementing or whatever. And somebody else is operating another team that's, managing, like bringing pipes from one place to another. And somebody else is, operating some other team that is doing the design, the interior decor, and making sure that this 100-story building has beautiful kitchens on each floor. Now they're like moving tiles around and moving nice marble and whatnot, and controlling robots doing that. And it could be fun. And maybe some folks would want to do that just for fun, and you could also get paid to do that, right? And it's amazing because you can do very, very hard things like lifting heavy things without actually having to lift anything at all, without actually having to like strain your back, or be strong enough to lift something, which oftentimes like people will get hurt in these industrial types of jobs. Yeah.
So, wow. I've seen a little bit of your posts talking about this and some teasers here and there. And like just to have this conversation and get to hear one about what you're up to today, but just to hear everything that led up to this, it just feels like such an incredible journey so far. And I'm excited to see where you go from here. Last words as we wrap up the episode here today.
Likewise, I'm super excited as well. I think there's a huge and amazing opportunity for robotics to literally augment all of our lives, bring down the cost of everything that we buy, so that the next big purchase that you make may not actually cost much at all. Your cost of living, cost of affordability of everything can go down, because now you have people who control fleets of robots. And I think with every technological advancement, there's always maybe a little bit of a concern around, what is this going to do to jobs and financial opportunity in my community? And I'm a big believer that this technology is going to end up creating way more jobs than we can possibly imagine, because now with fleet of robots that you can control, you can now start really building the world that you want to live in, and people are going to want to pay for that. And there's going to be opportunities to not only have more jobs, but perhaps have a robot in your home one day that can cook you a nice home cooked Indian meal that, perhaps some mom in India is cooking for you one night. And then the next night, now you're having a nice like home cooked Japanese meal that, somebody in Japan is cooking for you. And then you could have all different types of services that you could, you may not even imagine that you might be able to have with robots today. So I think it's exciting, the world we're heading. I think right now the immediate opportunity is the industrial spaces and moving matter in our warehouses and in our factories around. But I think it quickly expands from here.
Excellent. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story with us. So inspiring, and looking forward to seeing you again in person soon.
Amazing, Nathan. Thank you so much for having me. And it's amazing to be on the Supply Chaney. So a big fan, and I'm glad to be on here.
All right. Catch you later.